Okay, real quickly before we get through with the actual topic of this video, everybody has been asking me in my comments, Lego, you have to talk about Judd Brackett and the Minnesota Wild, because as a Vancouver Canucks fan who is a fan of Pettersson, Hughes, Gaudette, Besser, and all the other really nice prospects that developed into actual NHLers, many of whom were at the helm of Judd Brackett and his decision-making, it does hurt. It really does hurt to see Judd Brackett up and away leave the organization because of issues, let's just say, with how entitled he would be to certain drafting decisions. Now, am I salty that the Minnesota Wild are getting Judd Brackett and we're playing the Wild in the play-ins? Yes, of course I am. This was a comment over here from our Canucks on Reddit, but hey, this play-in series just became the Bracket Bowl. So I guess we can call it that now, and for Judd Brackett himself, if he goes to Minnesota and Minnesota gives him a lot more freedom to run the scouting department than the Vancouver Canucks would have, then I strongly believe we will seriously see the Wild getting a lot more really good prospects in their system over the next coming years. Really good complementary pieces to Kaprizov, to Boldy, to Beckman and Kovanov. They'd just be really, really good pieces. But today's video is not primarily about Judd Brackett and the Minnesota Wild, it is instead about some NHL dates. Also, excuse the EASHL gameplay in the background, I am indeed left D as a right-handed sniper, but, you know, there is a little bit of a flair that you play with when you play EASHL drop-in, so if that gameplay makes you puke, then I apologize. But we have ourselves some confirmation as to what the more important dates of the league are going to entail. We've had a few of these leak throughout the past few days, but just earlier in the week, Frank Seravalli laid everything out, and I just wanted to go over everything here in one video so we kind of have the process laid out as to what the league is going to go by for the play-ins, the playoffs, the upcoming 2021 stuff, and eventually the next season's worth of NHL action. Frank Seravalli had this tweet here on July 8th. He had the NHL's tentative return to play schedule. The whole NHL restarting will start on July 24th when NHL teams will travel to their hubs. This is Edmonton and Toronto. The very next day, teams will start exhibition games, with July 30th, 5 days later, being the start of the qualifying rounds. Qualifying rounds, in this case, akin to play-in series, meaning that we will see Vancouver, Minnesota, Edmonton, Chicago, etc., all those series within a short time frame, 5 days after we actually start seeing exhibition games. July is indeed a 31-day month, so after July 30th and July 31st, we will have 9 days before the Stanley Cup Playoffs actually starts, meaning that we will have 11 days, approximately a week, of play-in series action before round 1 of the actual playoffs kicks off on August 9th. The second round will start on August 23rd, the conference finals will start on September 6th, so a month after the playoff starts, and then the Stanley Cup finals will start on September 20th. Now, games in the Stanley Cup final will be played 2 days apart, meaning that the last possible Stanley Cup final game will be on October 2nd. The Stanley Cup finals will be Game 1, September 20th, Game 2, September 22nd, Game 3, September 24th, etc. You get the process. So laid out in its entirety right here is the NHL's return to play schedule. Ultimately, this is indeed all subject to change and may be pushed back a few days because it lists July 10 as the start of training camps, but we aren't anticipating them to open these training camps until July 13. There's room for this stuff to be moved, but for now, this is what we have. But, Lego, hey, you said this is going to be for other stuff too, not just the playoffs and the play-in series. Well, Frank Seravalli has your back covered on that as well. The tentative date for the 2020 NHL Draft is October 6th. It must follow the end of the Stanley Cup Finals and precede the free agent signing period. Okay, now that is different. Not the Stanley Cup Finals thing, but the free agent period thing. Because normally, in normal years, the NHL draft would be at the end of June, and the free agency period would start up on July 1st. This is going to be the first year in a long time? I'm really not too sure when it would be, but I would believe it would be the first time in a very long time, if not the first time ever, that the draft will be held before the free agency period. Now, this is honestly kind of big. Like, this has the potential to be absolutely game-changing, because normally teams will make trades at the draft, not just with the prospects and the picks, but with their salary cap. Normally teams make trades at the draft that allow them to do things later in the free agency period that would proceed a few days after the draft. Teams unload on big contracts and they sign other guys once the free agency period starts. That's not gonna happen here. The draft has to happen after all these NHL teams sign and make their new acquisitions, etc. Plus, the addition of a flat cap makes things even worse in that regard. But when exactly is this going to happen? Well, we have ourselves another Seravalli tweet that goes over all of that. Later of October 9th, or 7 days after the Cup final ends, is going to be October's free agent frenzy. And this has been awesome to hear about, because now we know that there is no interview process that NHL teams can conduct with players, and instead, once that free agent day comes up, it'll just be all hell breaking loose. Dante's Inferno up in here, 7 stages of hell, and so many teams just up and away, calling agents, wanting to speak with players, trying to sign everything, and trying to be first, just like some of you down there in the comments section below. Now, if you're an NHL GM, you kind of hate this, because now you actually have to get everything and make all your pitches in really quick succession. If you don't end up hitting with one guy and you have another target you have, who's to say that other target you had didn't already sign a contract with another team while you were on the phone with the first guy who ended up not signing with you anyway? The interview process gets rid of all of that, but for us fans over here, us normies who don't work in NHL organizations, this thing is awesome because it brings back all the ambiguity, all the guessing, all the gambling as to who's going to go where, and we will be in for much more surprises for sure. We also have ourselves the opening of training camps for 2020-2021. That will start in the middle of November, about a month and a half removed from the Stanley Cup final, and then December 1st, we'll have the start of the 2020-2021 regular season. Now, obviously, this is all subject to change, but the way this is laid out, this is moving pretty fast. Imagine if you're the Stanley Cup winning team. You guys end up coming back to your organization, you spend time with the team, you start practicing in the middle of July. You then start playing hockey again at the beginning of August. You then stop playing hockey at the latest in the beginning of October, and then a month and a half later, you're back in the training camp for the next season's worth of play. Half a month after that, you're starting up your next season. That is a small break, and honestly, it's gonna be tough for some of the guys who end up playing, let's just say, a full year's worth of hockey condensed into much fewer months. Because the NHL is already in the process of saying that, yes, we want a full 82-game season for next year, and that could take us into the middle of summer, who knows. So if they plan to shut things down and cramp up all the games together, this could be really tiring for the Stanley Cup winning team in 2020 by the time, like, February hits. Because by then, they would have already played a full playoff. They would have played maybe 20, 30 games in the regular season, and assuming they're going to be really good, they're going to have to play 50 more games and then even more playoffs on top of that. It's a year's worth of non-stop hockey for some teams, with only a month and a half break between the Stanley Cup Finals and the training camp of 2020-2021. Normally, we would have at least 2 or 3 months before teams start getting back up to speed in around September. So it's going to be really interesting for me to see how all these teams react and how everybody is able to handle a schedule that seems to be a lot more accelerated than what we're used to. But there you have it, we have ourselves a whole bunch of dates. Obviously, if you're a fan of the Red Wings, the Sabres, the Kings, the Sharks, the Ducks, the Devils, and the Senators, then you're looking at this and you're saying, yes, okay, let's get the NHL season back up in December. I don't want to wait till January to start watching my favorite team play hockey again. But, hey, we have our wish here, folks. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down below what you think about the NHL's return to play schedule, the 2021 schedule, and the big events like the draft and the free agency period. What do you think about the draft being held after the free agency period? That to me is probably the most interesting part about this, but I want to hear what you think. I hope you enjoyed this video. So that's Trollston99, and bye.